Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate number day 486, July the 9th, 2018, Monday. July the 9th, that's Mom's birthday. I'll be paying Mom a visit today. So let's see here. It's an incredible TowerGate video today. This will definitely be a top 5 of all the videos I've ever done in terms of the content of what we're going to talk about today. As you know, I mentioned a day or two ago in a video that Joe Mack left me a link, and it was a link to Dan Bongino, episode 757, where he was discussing this most recent article by John Carlin of thehill.com. And, of course, prior to this, we were talking about these incredible tweets and comments made by Paul Sperry, and the fact that they're so extremely damning. I mean, literally, once you prove that what Paul Sperry is saying in those tweets, these are felonies that he's telling you that occurred. In this particular article by John Carlin, he takes it even a step farther. I mean, he really shows you the entire plot, and he only has to select about a half a dozen, maybe 8 or 10 specific tweets that tell you exactly what happened. It's like we know exactly what this puzzle looks like. We're still missing some pieces, but we know what the puzzle looks like. We need to fill in some gaps. But as far as the big picture, we pretty well understand what happened in what we call Spygate. Now, I've been saying for months and months and months that there are going to be a lot of people going to jail when all this shakes itself out. And a lot of you people don't believe that, which is fine. I understand why you are skeptical. You have every reason to be skeptical. And I still believe it will take public pressure. Even with all this evidence, it will still take public pressure to make this happen. So I'm going to go through these major key points of this article by John Carlin. I think you're going to see exactly what I mean when I say a lot of people are going to jail when all of this finally shakes itself out. And, you know, I talk about Watergate a lot and how that worked out, because that's, you know, very similar to what we're talking about here. You're talking about, you know, the situation. So I talk about the fact in Watergate that it took like 2 years and 8 months, really, for the whole thing to unravel. And it took about maybe, you know, it was maybe 6 or 8 months before the election. No one was interested. Then Nixon wins the election, like a 48-state landslide win. And only after that, when they were able to tie the money from the burglars to the campaign to re-elect Nixon, only then did it really become a great big story. And then the entire media, who had no interest in the story before that, because they were sitting back saying, yeah, whoop-de-doo, Woodward and Bernstein, they're digging into this thing about this breaking at the Watergate Hotel. Nixon's going to win, you know, a landslide. And he ended up winning the landslide. And so there just wasn't a lot of interest in the liberal media at that time to jump on the story, until they were able to tie the money that was paid to the burglars back to the campaign to re-elect. And then at that point, all the journalists thought, uh-oh, there really is some fire here. And then they all started really working on the story. But Devin Nunes brought up a very good point on Jeanine Pirro's show the other day, when he was talking about the fact that, yeah, I mean, we're exposing all this information, and eventually we're going to get to the bottom of it and all this. But, of course, Jeanine Pirro very frustrated because she sees all this evidence just like all the rest of us, but we see nothing really happening. And Nunes brought up a very good point. He said, hey, you have to remember, the entire left-wing media, which is almost all the media, the FBI, the DOJ, stonewalling, the media blocking, the media will not investigate. It's like he said, if you had a real honest media and a story this big, they would all be investigating this story. Instead, they're using the power that they have in the media to run propaganda for the deep state, for the FBI, for the deep DOJ. They're on the other side of the ticket. Just imagine if the media were digging in and investigating this story the way that they try to investigate the non-story, which is the Trump-Russia collusion. They're all over that, even though there's no there there. But they put no time or effort into looking at the real crime and the real thing that happened that we should be talking about, the 2016 election. So this is a very good point by Nunes, that this is why things are moving the way they are, slowly, meeting lots and lots and lots of resistance. It's very hard to push this wall down, but we are going to push the wall down because, as I said, when the facts come out, and the facts will play themselves out in a courtroom, not in the media or anywhere else. Yeah, they'll play themselves out in the media, but they don't matter. What matters is the evidence that is brought forward in the court. That is what matters, okay? So, like I say, have been saying for months, be patient. Lots and lots of these perps are going to jail. So, John Solomon lays out in this particular piece just an incredible information. Some of it new information. Some of it information I think we've had. It's just no one's ever tied it all together the way he did in this article. So, absolutely incredible article. If you want to read it, just type into whatever search engine you use. Just type in John Solomon, memos detail, FBI's hurry the F up, pressure to probe Trump campaign. Memos detail, FBI's hurry the F up, pressure to probe Trump campaign is the name of the article by John Solomon. So you can Google that and read it for yourself if you like. But I'm going to go through the most salient points. And when I get done, you are going to understand exactly why. When I tell you a lot of people are going to jail, you are going to get it. Believe me. Because this lays out incredibly well exactly what I'm talking about and have been talking about for a very long time. So here's what we learned from the John Solomon article. Bombshells, obviously. So he talks about there's a text where these Strzok texts show that Strzok and his counterintelligence team were rushing in the fall of 2016 to find a derogatory information from informants to form a pretext to accelerate the probe and get a surveillance warrant on figures tied to President Trump. And we assume he's talking about certainly Carter Page, but possibly Manafort as well in this particular case. So this is the text that everybody's been talking about for a couple days, that where you have Peter's been stroking us, literally saying, get them to hurry the F up. You know, and it shows that there is some panic. They really need to make this happen. And again, this goes back to the original thing that we've talked about many times before in previous months about what exactly happened here and why they're so freaked out and why they have to get rid of Trump. It's because they launched multiple investigations against Trump and people around Trump illegally, without probable cause. They never thought he would win, so they never thought it would come up. But once it became late in the campaign and they saw the numbers tightening up and they knew everything was happening and they saw that Trump may have a chance to win, they freaked out because they thought, uh-oh, what if he does win? We've done all this stuff and he's going to find out. They are going to find out all the stuff we did that was illegal. There was no probable cause for any of this stuff, and it's not going to be covered up if Hillary loses. So this is the context of what we're talking about here. It's the panic setting in when they realize that all these things that they did were done illegally. Illegally. All the things they denied and said they didn't do will be proven that they did do them, and even more so, they were political. There was no cause. Devin Nunes trying to find what was going on. Look how long it took. He's trying to find out what launched the FBI investigation. It took him a long time for them to say, oh, well, it was the Papadopoulos and Downer meeting. That's what caused us to launch it on July 31st. Of course, we know all the other things that were going on before that. Now he's trying to figure out exactly, or find the evidence for what was going on, what investigations were going on prior to that, and what the probable cause was for those investigations. So this is the context that we're in right here. Peter's been stroking us, and his team and everyone around him who's been participants in this, of which there are several dozen people, they are panicking. They're panicking because they realize that Trump may win, and they don't have anything to justify all the surveillance and all the illegal activities, including putting informants in. They have nothing to justify any of it, which is why they are where they are now, which is why Rodenstein and the deep state are blocking everything, because they know they cannot produce the evidence, and once it comes out that they really had nothing and they launched all this with no evidence, no probable cause, a lot of these people are going to jail. And it goes all the way to the top. All the way to the top. So now let's look at this text again. As John Solomon's saying, the Strzok texts show that Strzok and his counterintelligence team were rushing in the fall of 2016 to find derogatory information from informants to form a pretext to accelerate the probe and get a surveillance warrant on figures tied to President Trump. Okay, so now we understand. They were panicking. They were panicking at this point. And this is in late September is when they began to panic. Now we have texts that show the FBI, specifically Strzok and Page, probably others as well, planted articles in media outlets, then used those articles as justification to get surveillance warrants. Do you remember months ago when we first started getting those Strzok Page texts, and we got those texts that were talking about how they were watching, and this would have included McCabe as well. They were watching and paying very close attention to all these media reports. And at first we didn't understand why is the FBI so concerned about media reports? And we later learned it's because they were either the sources of these media stories, or they were literally stories that they planted. And they were watching to see when the stories that they either influenced or planted would find themselves in the public, available to the public or made available to the public, because they would then act on them. They would create the false information, give it to a reporter to write the story, or they would actually just write a story and then have it planted out there in the media. Then they would sit back and watch and watch all these media networks. Boom. The stories come out. Now the stories come out. Now they act. So they were literally planting stories, either the information for the stories to some media outlet, or literally writing the story themselves, planting it out there, waiting for it to become in the public domain, and then once it did, boom, then they would act on that story. Do you realize what we're talking about here? And this can be proven. This can be proven from these texts that are now in the hands of both the Inspector General as well as these various committees doing the investigation, and will at some point find their way into the hands of a prosecutor, maybe Mr. Huber or someone else. So here, let me break this down for you, what I just said. So basically, you have Peter Strzok and Lisa Page monitoring the media, watching for news articles to appear that they either created or were the source for. Then, and specifically, it was one of those articles, a 2016 September article, which said, where they quoted law enforcement sources as saying that the FBI was investigating Carter Page. So they're watching and waiting for this story, and then the story pops, and like, oh, there it is, the story's up. And the story was about, the story they were talking about, the story they were waiting to pop up, was the story about that was planted saying that the FBI was investigating Carter Page. They essentially planted the story or the source of it. Then they're waiting for it. Then the story's written. Now it's out there. That caused Carter Page to respond to this article by sending a letter to James Comey complaining about the completely false leak. Writing him letters saying, hey, some law enforcement source, we assume FBI or something, has leaked to some media outlet that I'm under investigation. You know, I'm not under investigation or something. So anyway, they're watching and waiting for this article. Finally, this article hits. There it is. They're talking about the fact that the article is posted up, and the article they were referring to is the article which was about the law enforcement saying that Carter Page was under investigation. So then Carter Page responds by writing Comey a letter saying, hey, I don't know who your source is, what you guys are doing over the FBI, but you're leaking some bad stuff to the press. So then what happens next is Strzok and Page use the letter that was written to Comey by Carter Page as the pretext to interview, to conduct the interview. And this was written to Lisa Page by Peter Strzok on September the 26th, 2016, where he basically says, hey, there is the pretext we needed. In other words, the response to the story coming out, Carter Page writing Comey was the letter, became the pretext that they used to try to press for a Title I surveillance warrant. And that's exactly what happened. This pretext became the cause to launch the first Title I surveillance warrant on Carter Page. And keep in mind, a Title I surveillance warrant gives you the two-hop theory. In other words, if you're allowed to Title I surveillance on someone, you get to listen to not only collect everyone that he talks to, but everyone he talked to, and everyone they talk to, which would easily put you well within everyone around Trump, because that would mean anyone that Carter Page communicated with in the Trump campaign, and then everyone they communicated with in the Trump campaign. You would easily be able to capture Trump himself and probably the people closest to him. So this is what is laid out, exactly what happened, and Solomon lays it out very clearly. When you look at the timelines, when you look at what they're talking about, the articles are talking about, it becomes evidently clear that this is exactly what happened, and this is a major felony. A major felony. You see what I'm talking about here. They were, the FBI, specifically Page and Strzok, and the people around them, and this would include McCabe, because his name was mentioned in these texts, were either writing articles and giving them to media outlets, or they were providing information that made them the source of the articles. They would watch and wait for the article to come out. When the article would come out, then they would use that article as evidence or as a pretext to begin an investigation or to get a Title I surveillance warrant. And this is exactly how they got the Title I surveillance warrant on Carter Page. Devin Nunes wants to know how they got that Title I. What was the probable cause to get it? It's because they sourced a story to the media. They waited for the story to hit the media. Then Carter Page responds to that story by writing a letter to Comey and saying, hey, you guys are giving information. There's something wrong. I'm not a target of FBI investigation for counter-espionage or anything else. At which point Peter Strzok says, hey, there's the pretext we needed to investigate Carter Page, and that became the evidence, that became the probable cause which led to the Title I surveillance warrant on Carter Page. And when that comes out, a bunch of people are going to jail on that one, my friends. You can't do that. Okay? It's a big felony. Now we have internal memos that detail the pressure being applied by the FBI to DOJ prosecutors to get the warrant on Carter Page buttoned up before Election Day. Remember, they are panicking. They are freaking out. That's why they're breaking the law so badly. At this point, they don't even care if they're breaking the law anymore because they've already been doing it. What they've been doing is all illegal. So now they might as well plant stories and then use the very stories that they created or planted in order to justify some sort of a legal action. Or criminal investigation of something, or a surveillance warrant. They're already in. I mean, they've already committed all these crimes. What does it matter now? And that must have been what they're thinking, because they're completely unglued. So, as Solomon says, the internal memos that he's looking at detail the pressure being applied by the FBI to the DOJ prosecutors to get the warrant on Carter Page buttoned up before Election Day. And what he's talking about are these texts where Strzok is panicking, and he's telling Lisa Page, what is the holdup? What the hell is going on? The election's a month away. We need to get this cracking, man. We need this FISA warrant. We need it. What is the problem? So you can see that they're doing everything they can because they have to get something. They have to get something that they can use to justify all the things they've been doing. Because now they realize, hey man, if Trump does win, and it looks like things are tightening up, he could win. If he wins, we better have some damn evidence or something to prove all the stuff that we've been doing. Because if we don't, we're going to jail, man. That's what they're saying. So that's why they're panicking. It's self-preservation at this point. Screw Hillary. I mean, they care less about the damn election at this point. They're now talking about self-preservation. They know that they've just committed many felonies, along with a lot of their friends, and they're panicking. What are we going to do now? Well, we better find some damn evidence. It may be after the fact. We'll have to figure out how to make it look like it was before the fact. We'll worry about that when we get it. Let's just get it. So this is what's going on. Panic. So one email exchange has a subject line of Crossfire FISA. Crossfire FISA is the subject line on this particular email exchange between Strzok and Page, where they're discussing the talking points to get the FBI Deputy Director McCabe to persuade a high-ranking DOJ official to sign off on the warrant, because they're panicking and they feel like the DOJ is dragging and they're not getting this warrant. And Peter's been stroking us to say, man, Lisa, you got to get on these people over at DOJ because you're a DOJ lawyer. You got to let these people know they need to move. We need to go. We need to get this warrant. We need to go. That's the panic that is setting in. And so he's trying to get her to talk to McCabe, to get McCabe to apply pressure on the DOJ. So now you can see you got pressure coming from below, pushing above. I mean, McCabe's the boss, one of the bosses, the number 2 boss. And you got Peter who's been stroking and saying, hey, tell boss man to get his act in gear and start pushing to get this done. Otherwise, we got a lot of problems, as in like felony problems. So Crossfire Hurricane, we learn from John Carlin and the information he's been looking at, Crossfire Hurricane was only one of four separate investigations the FBI conducted related to Russia matters in 2016. One of the other operations was named Dragon. We don't know the name of the other 2, but John Carlin has identified that there were 4 separate investigations going on, not just one. It wasn't just Operation Crossfire. There were 3 other operations going on. Now, Strzok emailed Page on October 14th of 2016, less than 4 weeks before the election. And this particular email said, at a minimum, that keeps the hurry the F up pressure on him. So this again is relating to the previous conversations where Strzok is trying to get Lisa Page to, pressure Andrew McCabe to put pressure on the Department of Justice. And this is what that particular text that we've been seeing the last week or so, this is specifically what he was talking about when he said, at a minimum, that keeps the hurry the F up pressure on him. That's Peter's been stroking us, telling Lisa Page, let's put the pressure on McCabe, or whoever is the decision maker, because we've committed all these felonies. We need to find some sort of excuse for why we did all this stuff. This is our best shot, and we need to get it going, and somebody's dragging her feet. This should put the pressure on McCabe. That's what they were doing, applying pressure, because they're feeling a lot of pressure themselves. They're panicking. Then, just 4 days after that particular text from Strzok to Page, this exact same team of people, Page, Strzok, and the others that we talk about, they were rushing to get the approval for another FISA warrant for another investigation, that one being codenamed Dragon. So 4 days after this, they're pushing now to get this Title I FISA on Carter Page, trying to apply the pressure to McCabe to get him to apply pressure at someone over to the DOJ who they thought were dragging their feet. 4 days later, they're applying pressure for another FISA warrant that's in regards to a completely different code name investigation called Dragon. So this is how hard and how hard they were working and how badly they were panicking. They also talk about this Woods review, a term that if you haven't heard, you're going to hear. Woods review, basically a Woods review is a final review to make sure the facts supporting probable cause are accurate and legal before a FISA court application can be presented to a FISA court. This is the final person who's responsible for that process. In other words, the last thing that happens before they take the warrant to the FISA court is they go to this person, this group of people, the top person being the head of the DOJ NSD. He is the final decider. And there's a group of people from various disciplines within the FBI and DOJ who are the final group. And this is what's called a Woods review. And they are supposed to review and make sure that the probable cause, that the warrant is legit, that everything checks out, and that everything is correct and legal and the whole 9 yards. Well, we know all about that, and that's what Nunes is trying to get to the bottom of now, the truth about the FISA warrant, which he says was based on a lot of crap. And who would have been the final person? Who was the person who finally had to make the final decision, the top head person who made the decision on that through the Woods process before going to the FISA court? Well, that man's name was John Carlin. Remember him? Remember months and months and months ago, we were all trying to figure out, okay, John Carlin, okay, right after the first FISA warrant is signed, right after they get the first FISA warrant, all of a sudden, boom, within the next couple days, John Carlin resigns. He leaves. He's gone. Now we learn exactly why. Because John Carlin was the final decider during the Woods review that made the decision to go ahead with that Title I FISA. He was ultimately the person who made the final decision that yes, this can go to the FISA court now to get the request for the FISA court warrant. And it was John Carlin who was the final person responsible in that decision-making process. John Carlin was the final person. He makes the decision, and then boom, a couple of days later, announces he's leaving the Department of Justice National Security Division, and he's gone back in the private sector. Something tells me that he's got a court date coming. He was the final approval for the FISA warrant, which was based on lies, based on a story that the FBI wrote or sourced themselves. They wrote the story, then they used the story that they wrote, essentially, to get the FISA warrant. And Mr. Carlin signed off on it. He's going to jail with a lot of his friends. Texts show that Strzok was pressing Page to apply pressure on the Department of Justice to move on the FISA request on Carter Page. This request was granted in October, just 2 weeks before the election. Very, very unusual for the process to move like that. And again, so this is what happened. Remember, all that I'm talking about here was all happening in a short period of time, in about a 5-6 week period of time, mid to late September, up through about the end of October, when all this pressure was happening, because they saw that the numbers were turning. It looked like Trump may now have a chance to win, and they're sitting around talking, going, uh-oh, what if he wins? If he wins, all this is going to come out, all the stuff we did, all this illegal stuff we did, and we had no probable cause to do any of it. And this is why they were so freaked out. And we can see this whole thing escalates, as John Solomon points out in his story. Now, the day after Trump wins the election, Strzok emails Page saying, "We need all of their names to scrub." Then Strzok tells Page that we need to exchange our list. They're talking about the list of people to scrub, as we each have potential derogatory confidential informants. Info that the other doesn't have. Oh my God. You talk about nailing people to the wall on literally one comment right here. When he says, okay, we need all capital letters. Strzok uses capital letters. He says we need capital ALL, all of their names to scrub. That means investigate. Scrub means to investigate. We need all their names to scrub. Then, he says, we need to exchange our list of people to scrub with these others who also have potential derogatory information from their confidential informants. And we need to make sure that we all know that we're all on the same sheet of music, that what our confidential informants, what they have, that we know what they have and they know what we have, so that we can put it all together. So what he's telling us in just this one text, he's telling us that the day after the election, they really panicked. And they said, oh man, we're in real trouble. We tried to, we're working on the page, we're working on Manafort. We need a lot more than that, folks. We just got to go after everybody. Let's just go ahead and get a name of everyone who's in the Trump universe, and let's go ahead and scrub every damn one of them. Let's go ahead and investigate every damn one of them. And not only that, let's get the information from our confidential informants who we've planted into the campaign. But let's keep in mind that we have these other investigations, other operations going, and they also have their own confidential informants going. Let's make sure we all get together, exchange all the names of the people we're going to scrub, investigate, and let's make sure that we get all the dirt that all of our confidential informants from the various investigations that are going on, let's make sure we get together and compare notes so we get everything we can. This is how desperate they were and how much they were panicking. Also, an extraordinary and very suspicious measure was taken by the FBI right after Trump was elected. After he actually, I think it was right after he was elected, maybe after inaugurated, but certainly after he was elected. When, as a matter of procedure, the FBI was to name an FBI agent to be the liaison to the Trump transition team. So Trump wins the election. Now he's putting together his Trump transition team. And when that happens, when any president wins the election and he's putting together a transition team, the FBI supplies the president, the incoming president, and his transition team with an FBI person. With an FBI person to act as a liaison. Normally it's someone who's pretty polished, been in the FBI a while, someone who is good in the area of politics, and things and such like that. That's the type of individual that they normally put into the president's team as the FBI liaison. But in this particular case, what they did was the person who they put in to be the liaison turned out to be a guy who was an FBI agent who was a technical surveillance expert. A surveillance geek is the person that they put in to be the liaison. And more importantly than that, that decision was greatly influenced by the counterintelligence division of the FBI, who normally would have nothing to do with a liaison to the transition team. It's normally like a political position that you give a guy who's been around for a while. He's pretty smooth. He's kind of understands politics. You don't take someone out of your you don't take someone who specializes in putting together and designing and planting electronic gadgets to spy on people. But that's exactly the person that they put in to the Trump transition team, an expert in dealing with these devices and various types of things that they have at the FBI that are designed to spy on people. That's the guy that they put in the Trump campaign to be the liaison. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable story by John Solomon. And as you can see, just these things I laid out with the things we laid out yesterday from Paul Sperry, the tweets we laid out about been stroking us, fixing logs, and all sorts of other things. I'm telling you folks, the evidence is overwhelming. And when it finds its way, and it will finally finds its way with a lot of help from public pressure, finds its way into a courtroom, and these facts are brought forward, there'll be no way that they can deny what they did. No way. They launched an investigation. First, they fixed an investigation for the rotten Reverend Clinton. Then they launched a frame-up operation to take down Trump as a candidate. When that failed, they continued and stepped up the operation to take him out as president. That's what they did. And they did it with no evidence. All that surveillance, all these investigations, all these informants, all the stuff that went on, they never had probable cause to begin any of it. That's why Nunes can't find it. And when they get to the bottom of all this, a lot of people are going to jail. Just as I told you. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow. You guys take care. Goodbye.